but we are trying to rectify that. So we are getting started. So thank you very much for joining us. Today we are honored to host Dr. Crispin Chinguno, who is one of ours at SPU, and he's going to be presenting on some of the work that he's been doing. So I'm just going to quickly introduce him before I give him the opportunity to start. Dr. Chinguno is working at SPU, like I highlighted, as a senior lecturer in industrial and economic sociology here in Kimberley. So much of his research interrogates how work is organized and how it changes over time, and its embedded contestations. He's a National Research Foundation rated researcher and also a future professor fellow. He's also an alumni of the Global Labour University and the International Center for Decent Work and Development at the University of Kassel. And he graduated with PhD in sociology from the University of Wits in 2015. And his work has been published in a number of journals. So let me give Dr. Chinguno the opportunity to start his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for the invitation, and good afternoon, colleague, good afternoon, everyone. Those who are online, if you can confirm if you are seeing my slides, that would be, you can confirm if you are seeing my slides.
Yeah, I think we've seen some thumbs up, yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much.
I think you must unmute. We can't hear anything online.
May you please confirm if you can hear me now?
No, I've unmuted.
Are you confirming, colleagues?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. I will start again. Thank you. Research project, which I
Yeah, you can unmute there.
Yeah, okay. Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So sorry, colleagues, I think we should be ready now to go. Sorry for the technical glitch. I will start off again. So I would sort of like, in a way, first of all, like to thank Doc for the opportunity to present my work. So this is part of an ongoing research, sort of like intellectual sort of project. I think, as Doc has highlighted, my focus is around the organization of work, how work is organized and how it changes over time. So I initially, my PhD focusing on mine workers in the Platinum Belt. Then when about 6-7 years ago, when I came to Kimberley, there is not much mining that is happening around here anymore. They still sort of like, when Kimberley is in the process of transitioning itself from a mining town to a service sort of like in a way town with the establishment of the university 10 years ago. So I became very interested in sort of like trying to understand this new phenomenon in terms of digitalization of work and how work changes over time from around 2018, 2019, when I arrived here in Kimberley. So it's part of an ongoing research sort of like in a way interest that I have been doing the last 5 to 6 years. So one of the things is sort of like in a way, as you are aware, we are currently going through what we can call a digital sort of like revolution, whereby the digital technology has become part of our everyday in terms of how, as a social structure, in terms of maybe how we interact, social interaction, how we interact as in our everyday, including even the way that we organize work. So it becomes sort of like, in a way, very interesting in terms of maybe how should we understand this digital sort of like revolution in the context of digital, in the context of in the context of
Yeah, you can continue.
okay. Has become part of our everyday. Even here, we did the way that our education system, the way that our transport system, it is sort of like in a way comes in with new ways of organizing work and new ways of creating value for the customers. So what it means in a way, this sort of like in a way has culminated in a very complex sort of like way of reorganization of work. So digital technology has got effect in terms of maybe the labor process, how work is organized, and that also has got effect in as far as how the workers themselves respond. So this raises a number of questions in trying to embarking on this sort of like in a way, this so-called digital sort of like in a way revolution. It raises quite a number of questions in terms of the fact that digital technology has become pervasive in the way that we do many of the things that we normally used to do without technology. So in the context of the organization of work, can we start thinking about a sort of like a model of capitalism where workers becomes obsolete? Can we actually have a capitalism that does not have workers? And then can we sort of like in a way, when we look at the overall sort of like motivation behind this accelerated digital revolution, is it just about enhancing the productivity of labor, or the outright sort of like in a way, the ultimate aim is actually to eliminate labor in the process? So, and then what is important is sort of like as a society, we need to really think about technology. When we're thinking about technology, how can we make sure that the technology that comes from society, we redirect it so that it enhances the quality of life for society? So these are some of the questions that sort of like arise when you look at this accelerated sort of like digitalization of work in the context of capitalism. So the question there, the fact that it comes in with new services that you never imagined, the fact that now you can just, with the click of a button, you can just order anything that you want, in this case, food delivery. But when you look at the digital sort of like platform work, there's still contested in terms of what it is. There's still debate on what it is and what it is not. So in terms of maybe conceptualizing this, there are quite a number. For example, they call it platform work, digital work, Uberization, gig work. There are so many sort of like concepts that are still, so it's still quite very uncertain. But when you look at it, there's a clear divide in between what is called local and remote gig. So by local gig, it means that when you request a service on the phone, digitally, and then there's the service is sort of like provided physically. Like you order a pizza digitally, and then someone comes and deliver it physically. And then remote gig, it's where the service is requested remotely, and then the service is also delivered also remotely. Like for example, you are working, some people are working here in Kimberley, maybe they are working for accounting firms in the US. The service is sort of like digital, and it's also how it is delivered is also delivered digital. So that distinction is quite very important. But what is important in a way, it's all work at the same time, digital work. It comes in with a new reorganization of labor process, and in a way, in our context, like for example, here in South Africa, the one that we normally seem to see, which is more visible, is the local gig, the e-hailing, Uber, what they call it, Bolt, Mr. Delivery, and also including sort of like domestic service, hair salons, domestic service, B&B, all that sort of like in a way, it constitutes part of the sort of like gig platform work or gig work in the South African context. So, and then there are those who are advocating for these new ways of organizing work, this new regime of organizing work. There are some who argue that it actually revolutionary in a way that it opens up the labor market. It allows the access to the labor market to people who ordinarily don't have access, to people who have got a growing problem of unemployment. So by the click of a button, you don't need to go to an employer. You just, if you have got a phone, you got a bike, you can just straight away, you just log in and go to work. So, and the fact that it promises that there's a promise of flexibility, not just on the side of the customer, but also on the side of the workers. There is the workers feel that they are not bound by the traditional sort of like employment relationship. They can easily decide when to log on and when to log off in some of the cases. And then,
no, I think we have a problem. I don't know what's happening. Can you confirm if you can hear us?
Yes, very well.
Okay, excellent.
So this is also part of the rise in terms of precarious sort of like regimes, in terms of the precarious forms of employment. And then one of the most important characteristics is that this is a new type of work which is quite very basic, if you put it that way. So, and low end in terms of the skills. So what it means, we have got a situation where the people who are doing this work, they are highly educated. And the contradiction is that they are doing a low end sort of like in a way, low end work with people who are graduates, who have got degrees and diplomas and whatever, work which traditionally is supposed to be done by people who don't like by shift, for example. But in this instance, we are talking of people who are teachers and whatever, who are teachers and graduates and with postgraduate degrees, some of them. So in terms of the research question for this particular paper, this is sort of like in a way, I'm trying to answer the question, this sort of like two questions. How digital technology is shaping the organization of work in the food delivery sector, and how is this shaping workers' experiences and responses? So these are sort of like, in a way, the question that I'm grappling with for this particular sort of like, in a way, question paper, which fundamentally talks to the labor process. How should we understand the labor process? So my last presentation, I was asked why specifically I decided to do this research here, particularly in Kimberley. So my argument, like I've always, like, this is a case study I draw from the two main delivery food platforms here in Kimberley, Mr. D and Take a Lot, which are quite very similar in terms of maybe how they organize their labor process, but they are also quite very distinct in terms of how there's some variation. I will try to explain in terms of the level of adoption of technology, and also some differences in terms of the labor process. But what is important in a way is that I draw primarily from drivers' subjective experience. I've been working with these guys for a long time now, since 2018, 2019. So I'm very much sort of like, in a way, part and parcel of them when it comes to, in terms of, so it's very ethnographic in a way that it's an ongoing sort of like research that I've been doing for quite some time. And
yeah, but I think you are using that mic, so we can still hear. Okay, I think you can continue. I'll just ask online if they can hear.
Okay, so it's part of an ongoing sort of research that I have been doing for quite some time in terms of the methodology. And then when it comes to, I draw from what is generally called the labor process theory, which is a very broad sort of like, in a way, theoretical framework in terms of trying to understand the labor process in the context of digital technology. So you would find that the labor process theory is sort of like, in a way, is very much informed by the work of Karl Marx, who sort of like, in a way, see that dialectical conflict between the owners of the means of production and the workers, in terms of there's an inherent conflict which is driven by the fact that the capital is always trying to enhance how it controls the labor process, and workers on the other hand, they also sort of like respond by a manifestation of various forms of resistance. And then, so I draw on the work of Braverman. I start off from Braverman, Buravoy, and also of late articulating this to the work of Foucault's neoliberal sort of like, in a way, governmentality, to also understand, because there's a limitation of just using the Marxian sort of like, in a way, lenses, the fact that it does not allow us to understand the micro sort of like, in a way, process. So the neoliberal sort of like, in a way, governmentality allows us to be able to understand the micro processes. So I am drawing on from the work of Gandini, who argued that it sort of like, in a way, the labor process theory is quite very ideal in terms of helping us to understand the digitalization of work, because it's sort of like, in a way, because it sort of like, in a way, focuses on the point of production, it focuses on how the work is designed and how work is organized, and also the power relations and how workers sort of like, in a way, respond to this contestation between labor and capital. So that's sort of like, in a way, the lens, the theoretical lens that sort of like, in a way, guides this particular study. I think I would sort of like, in a way, presume that you guys, you have had access to the paper. I have access to the so that's sort of like in a way that's sort of in a way the theoretical the theoretical lens that is sort of that is guiding this.
Sorry, Doc. I think you can email me the PowerPoint since you're now disconnected.
Okay.
Yeah, just email because there's some people that cannot see. Okay, the slides are not moving. Sorry, just a minute. I think he has been disconnected on his laptop that he was sharing it. So I don't know what's the problem. So I'll share with mine so that he can continue. So yeah, you can use yours. Try to share on my side. Then maybe you can continue with that slide.
Okay. Let's see if I will be able to. Okay.
The network has just been bad.
Yeah, it's really bad. So I was on the theory part of it. So I draw from a very broad sort of like in a way labor process theory, which is anchored in a very Marxist sort of tradition. So it includes drawing from the work of Bourdieu and then articulating that to a more post-structural sort of like Foucauldian sort of neoliberal sort of like governmentality. I think it helped us to understand how these workers make sense of their subjective experiences. So let's I would sort of like try to look at the Kimberley as a context. So when you look at the gig work in Kimberley is quite a very old, sort of like one of the oldest city, older than Johannesburg, actually. So when you look at the question around the labor process, understanding work, I think Kimberley is quite very, very important in a number of ways. When you look at the history of industrial capitalism in South Africa, the starting point is Kimberley and then Johannesburg. But of late, you find that most of the scholars who try to understand the labor studies, there's emphasis on the Witwatersrand, what is called PWV, Pretoria, the Vaal, and the Witwatersrand, in terms of focusing on mining and maybe later in sort of manufacturing. But there's an emphasis around the PWV. So there's very little sort of like focus outside the PWV and also at some of the sort of like the major cities like Cape Town and Durban. So I think it's the Kimberley comes in with a very sort of like important context in a way that is a city that is in transition, sort of like. So I managed to, I think, since in the last 5 years, to talk about at least 40 drivers. But the fact that they're always changing, there's a very high sort of like in a way turnover in terms of the workers come in and go. So I took about 3 to about 40 of them. So when you look at the delivery, the food delivery sector in the South African context, it's a new sort of like in a way new space of work, if you put it that way, estimated of about 310,000 workers. That was in 2022. It could be more than that. We should be having more than that. Now we're around 2024. And there are two main players in this food delivery sector, the Uber Eats and Mr. D. And then here in Kimberley, I think the dominant sort of like of the two, I think Mr. D is sort of like dominant when it comes to food delivery in Kimberley. So when you look at Uber, I think it's very important for us to reflect on the two sort of like the major players. Uber Eats, it's an American sort of like in a way, San Francisco, which it was started in San Francisco as a digital sort of like in a way company, and entered the South African market in 2030 with its introduction of the e-hailing sort of transport service in Johannesburg. And then while it's Mr. D, it started off as a very South African sort of like company, which started in 1992. where you find that it started off offering delivery services to hotels and restaurants that did not offer food. Maybe they only offer beds and whatever with the breakfast, but they don't have sort of like anyways lunch and dinner. So Mr. D started off specializing in that, but through the use of fixed landline sort of like in a way phones. And then, but it went on through a transition where it was taken over by NASPAS, or which becomes Takealot in around 2016, and then Takealot, which is a logistics sort of like a company, it launched its first app in 2016, and then to date we have got over 800 restaurants and 4,500 drivers who are registered on this app, over 2,600 areas in South Africa. So, and then what a major sort of like in a way, what is have development in as far as Takealot is concerned is that it brokered a partnership with one of the major retail chain, Pick and Pay, for it to offer service for its online grocery service to some of, I think some of Pick and Pay sort of like the way supermarkets. But of course, Pick and Pay has got its own internal sort of like delivered services. So when you look at we've already talked about Kimberley, plus or minus 200,000, sort of like in a way, a population of 200,000, and then we have got a total of from my sort of like in a way research and interviews with the workers, there is an estimated number of like 250 delivery workers in South Africa, and then Mr. T, as I've highlighted, is the main delivery app in Kimberley. It's sort of it is characterized by, it has got a physical office in the downtown, the CBD of Kimberley. So you would find that there are about 200 active drivers. Of the 250 drivers that we have in Kimberley, 200 of them, they are on Mr. D. They are on Mr. D. And then Uber has got just plus or minus 20 of the drivers. And there are over 30 restaurants, 30 delivery drivers who works either also for in-house, sort of like restaurants. Some restaurants, they have got their own drivers, and plus or minus 30 sort of drivers. And the majority of these workers, they are migrants. They are coming from migrants who are coming from other countries such as Malawi, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Nigeria. I think there were about two or so Nigerian. I think one of them was involved in an accident some time ago. And then they are quite very young people who are very highly educated. They are plus or 20 to 30. Between the age group of 20 to 30. And it's quite a very gendered sort of like in a way sector, in a way that there are very few women who are active in this sector. The last time there were 5, and then the last time I checked, they went down to 3. Very few sort of like in a way women are active, especially I'm talking about here in Kimberley. In this sector, there are quite very few. And it's also quite very racialized in a way that what is interesting, you find that whilst the migrants are quite from other African countries, they are quite very young and black. There's also a significant sort of like in a way number of quite very old, retired sort of like pensioners, who most of them are white and colored. Many of them who are coming out of retirement and then use this maybe as part of part-time sort of like in a way. And then for the majority of them, delivery work is not a first time sort of like in a way job. And then when you look at the income ranges between 8,000, according to the interviews that I conducted, 8,000 to 20,000 per month. That's the income that the average sort of like in a way. It's quite very precarious in terms of, but it's ranged between plus or minus 8,000 to 20,000 per month. So for most of the drivers that I interviewed, this is quite a better sort of like in a way of making a living compared to what they used to do. Like some of them who used to work as a shopkeeper in a spaza shop where he was getting just 1,000 rands per month, and now is getting 8 to 20,000 a month. So in a way, and then there's a heavy dependence of what I call customer benevolence, which means that there is a heavy dependence on tips. I don't know, you all know tips. So at the end of the service, these drivers, they expect to be tipped by the client. And then that's actually contribute quite significantly to their income. 30% of their income is actually something that comes from clients. So this has got an effect in terms of maybe how we understand the power relations and the labor process. I will talk to that. And then I have got a table here where I try to compare the two sort of like, in a way, delivery companies in terms of maybe how they try to organize the labor process for the two sort of like delivery companies. So you would find that for Mr. D, it has got a very hybrid sort of like way of organizing the labor process, whereby the workers they are expected to sign on duty. There's a signing on office downtown Long Street. There are 3 times when they are supposed to sign on at 9 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So there's a logbook there where you sign in your name, you sign in that you have got a uniform, you have got change, and you are ready to go for duty. And then Uber, on the other hand, it does not even have an office here in Kimberley. It operates all the way in San Francisco. You log in the system, then if you want to work, you just log on. You don't have to be sort of like in a way. So there's a lot of this branding where Take-A-Lot, they use this as part of their branding in terms of the uniform that the driver, the bag, they sort of like branded, but it's not the same. Uber does not have any uniforms, does not have any forms of branding. And then for Take-A-Lot, they are designated sort of like in a way zones, working zones, where we are only expected to work in a specific sort of like working zone, which is not the same as as the Uber. For Uber, there is no sort of like designated working zones. So, but in Cuba, because it's a very small sort of like the working zone, the whole of Cuba is one sort of like designated sort of like a designated zone. And then these workers, they also have got quite a very collective sort of WhatsApp sort of like group, which for those who are working for Mr. D, this WhatsApp group, it also includes their managers at the office in downtown Long Street. But at the same time, in addition to this WhatsApp group that has sort of like management, they also have got their own sort of like individual sort of like WhatsApp groups. So you will find that with Take-A-Lot, they are supposed to sign on specific times, 9 o'clock, 11, 1400, and then the knocking off time for everyone, it's 2200 hours. They knock off at 2200 hours. And then you are supposed to sign on and confirm that you are ready for duty. And then there's a heavy sort of like use of algorithms in terms of organizing the workflow, organizing the labor process. So in such a way that the aim here is to limit the involvement of management in terms of the labor process. So what it means, even with the allocation of work, it's all done through the app and through the algorithm. There's very little in terms of human sort of like involvement. This is one of the old sort of like signing off a place downtown Long Street. And then it was one morning when I was sort of like accompanying one of the drivers. They were going to sign on, and then the driver, after signing off, then you go to your workstation. You prefer sort of like a workstation. There is one of the workers collecting an order, and then and then some of them they use motorbikes, and then when some of them they use these small cars in a way as part of their as part of their work. But you find that they sort of like there's a very interesting dynamic in terms of maybe who uses cars and who uses. All the women, for example, they use the small cars, and then what it means also you find that
So the next question is sort of like, in a way, how the question around how the workers are adapting. I talked about the labor process. Then the next question is around how the workers are adapting or responding to these regimes of control by the platforms. So what it means, in a way, there's a growing sort of like, in a way, a black market sort of like, in a way, where you can buy profiles in terms of someone can sell you, can rent to you their profile if then you can use that. For example, it's not easy for everyone to get, maybe you don't have the documentation. So some of the workers, they sort of like, you know, when they are not, some of them, they've got more than 2 profiles. So they rent it out to some, or maybe you're for the Uber and they take a lot. They rent out the Uber and then use the take a lot. Sometimes when they are off sick or they don't want to go to work, they can rent out their profiles. And then some of them, they work across 2 different platforms at the same time. You've got a profile for take a lot and profile, but it's not allowed. They are not allowed to do that. And then there's also selective sort of like participation in terms of, you know, when the most sort of like, in a way, profitable times to sign on. So for example, you know that today is a Saturday. If you sign on from 11 o'clock, it will be very busy. And then you also need to know selective participation in terms of the geography of the city. They know that if you are going to work close to the terminus here in town, you may likely going to get orders that can take you to a Ekasi. And then if you are on take a lot does not, it pays you per delivery. It does not pay you according to the distance. So you find Uber drivers would mostly prefer this part of the town near the taxi rank because they would travel longer distance and they get more. But for Mr. D, they are not, there's no incentive for traveling sort of like, in a way, longer distance. So then there's a very strong community of workers, especially, which is also quite very digitalized in a way that they've got very strong sort of like, they are very strong on social media, WhatsApp groups, a Facebook page, which they use for various sort of things where they're selling uniforms, bags, motorcycles, and sort of like, in a way. And then there's a very strong deployment of emotional labor. So what it means in a way, when they because they know that 30% of their income is coming from customer benevolence, tips and whatever. So there's some element of performance when they're actually delivering, sort of like, in a way. So the culture of tipping has become sort of like institutionalized. So it started off not on the app, but the drivers ended up demanding for the platform to actually include it on the app. In some cases where the customer don't have cash, they can just include it on the specific that they're tipping. So they're tipping the driver, and also they are rating the drivers and the service at the same time. So, and then the drivers are also, there's also the element of, there's a very strong collective solidarity, if you put it that way. But you would find that in Kimberley, so it's also in Johannesburg, these workers, they tend to organize along nationalities. You find that Zimbabweans, in addition to have a common sort of like WhatsApp group, they have their own sort of WhatsApp group as Zimbabwean drivers, or as Malawian drivers, or Mozambican drivers. They have their own sort of like, you find that Mozambican drivers, because there are very few, but they speak, some of those Mozambican drivers who speak languages that are found in Malawi, they work along the same line with the Malawians. And then the Mozambican who also speak the same languages, as in they have the same languages. They speak, like especially those who speak in Shindau, Tsonga, you find some of them, they also part of the group that they've got, part of the organized with the Zimbabwean drivers. And then there's a WhatsApp group that also involve, for those who are on Mr. D, that also involve management. So this is quite very interesting in terms of maybe how these workers, sometimes they actually use these platforms to talk back to management, especially about their working conditions, especially when they are in a crisis in terms of maybe how their working conditions. So I draw quite a number of conclusions in a way in this paper. I hope you guys have managed to, those who have managed to read. So the first thing is about space. When we look at how there's a contestation in terms of maybe the organizational space and also the labor process. So there's a contestation of the labor process and the contestation, a dialectical contestation of the labor process and space. And then we find that the regimes of control of the labor process in the case of food delivery is also about a struggle of also about controlling space. It's also a spatial, sort of like in a way, a condensation which involves the reorganization of space. So you'll find that the two delivery platforms, they have got quite very similar, sort of like in a way, labor process, but you'll find that they adopt different strategies of manipulating space and the labor process. And then whilst we find that the platforms, they sort of like in a way adopt their own ways of manipulating space, the workers also have got their own ways of manipulating space to their sort of like to their advantage. So what it means in a way, space is quite very important in terms of the power relations between the labor and the capital in this particular case. And then I also sort of like in a way argue that you will find that the use of social media is quite very critical here in creating communities that addresses both collective and individual sort of like in a way individual sort of like in a way problems. So we find here that whilst there is quite a very close sort of like use of digital sort of like in a way surveillance in this case. So you'll find that workers also respond through the use of digital technology to exercise their agency. By in this case, you find that they use the WhatsApp group to talk back to management. For example, you find they went to a delivery and find that the client is not there. They take a picture, they send it back on the WhatsApp group. The management will see that I was there on time, but the customer was not there, so I should not be sort of like in a way punished. So that also highlights the limitation of algorithms, where in terms of maybe managing the labor process. So we see here that I think my conclusion here is that when the sort of like this proliferation in terms of the use of digital technology, this digital revolution, in the context of food delivery sector, it does not really displaces worker agents, but it's sort of like workers' agency. It becomes sort of like in a way reconfigured, and in some cases also adapting to this sort of like digitalization, where you find that this use of digital technology, it closes spaces for the workers, but open up new spaces in terms of how they come up with new innovative sort of like repertoires of new forms of collective, if you put it that way, collective bargaining or collective action by the employers. And then also the variation between how Takealot and Uber adopt technology, digital technology, it also quite very important in terms of maybe how it also informs the different ways in terms of how the workers respond and their experiences. So, and then the adoption of the tipping culture, or this institutionalization of tipping culture, I sort of like argue that it constitutes part of this neoliberal sort of like in a way governmentality, which is sort of like in a way designed to direct workers to act in a particular way that is sort of like in a way informed by advancing their own personal sort of like in a way, So when you look at the question around, because these workers have been able to organize a collective strike here in Kimberley. So when you look at agents, it's not just about adapting to the dictates of capitalism, but it's also in a way about transforming the conditions for the workers at the end of the day. So, and then the last part, when you look at the organization of the gig work, it is not just about controlling the labor process to maximize extraction of surplus value, but when you look at the adoption of the tipping culture and so forth, it also becomes sort of like, in a way, embedded in societal practices that are aiming at sort of like, in a way, reconfiguring societal norms, values, and culture that aligns to this gig sort of like, in a work ideology. So that when you become the client, you are almost like, or it becomes a culture that you're supposed to value and culture to tip. So it becomes, so this platform, they're actually not just about reconfiguring workplace relations, but they're also reconfiguring the broader values in society. So what it means, in a way, is so that we get the consent of the society and the consent of the client, who in this case, this culture of tipping, it turns clients from being clients to actually employers in a way, because they take over the responsibility of remunerating sort of like, in a way. And then the fact that these workers are migrants, the way that this sector is quite very gendered, and the way that is still very much, it takes us back to the mining labor regimes, which was also anchored on the migrant labor process, the migrant labor system. So we would find that the food delivery sector in here in Kimberley, it is anchored on pre-existing local cultural social differences, such as nationality, race, gender, and the dependence on the migrant sort of like, in a way, of migrant sort of like, in a way, labor system. So yeah, that's the conclusion. Thank you, Chair, and my sincere apologies for the technological sort of like challenges. But yeah, I thank you, Chair.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Doc, for that insightful talk and very interesting presentation. So apologies for the technological glitch as well, but we would want to open up any responses to that presentation. I think we'll start with the students. I see Doc Isaac. Maybe we can start with you before we open up to the students first, and then we can open that up to everyone else. So go ahead, Dr. Chinyoka. I think I see your hand, Dr. Isaac.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Thanks, Dr. Chinguno, for the presentation. This was very great. It's morning here, so I just woke up and I had to really get into the presentation because I really like the work that you are doing. So thank you very much. It's a great way of revealing the new gig work that has been of interest to many people. Even here, right now, I'm in the United States, and this is a growing, a very huge industry. So, from your presentation, I have a couple of questions, but I won't take all the time to ask that. But let me focus on two questions. The first one is you you talked about the, I will call it a remuneration, or what the workers are making out of the work that they are doing. And you, if I recall, you seem to have suggested that they make about 8,000, and you gave an example of that person who was making 1,000 and they are now making 8,000. I wanted to find out from you if you have looked at this remuneration, maybe if you were to break it down into like an hourly rate and to see how much they make in an hour. And then if you were to do that, or if you have already done that, unfortunately I did not read your paper. So I'm just talking, responding this from your presentation. If you were to do this, you what will come up is that you might want also to consider the costs. You mentioned, I think you mentioned two platforms, the other one and the Uber. One, what I know is that here most of these workers, they will use their own cars, they put their own gas in, fuel in there, and they maintain the car. So if you were to put all those costs and at a monthly, to calculate a monthly income, how much do they really make? Because there's a huge debate in this gig work ride share, Uber Eats and all, to say how much do these workers really make, considering those expenses. So that's one thing. Then, so I wanted to hear your voice on maybe your response on that. And then the second one is, when you were talking, you suggested that most of these workers, they seem to have, I don't, I think you were talking about the other one, I don't remember the actual name, which is not Uber, that they have this, it still allows them to use their agents, and still allows the communication between the management and the workers. I don't know if you were talking about Uber. I would like to hear if you were talking about that setup. Is still happening with Uber Eats, because what I've seen here in here in America and Europe is that there's no, that communication is dwindling. It has been cut because most of the offices that Uber used to have here, there is Uber and Lyft. And many others, but that communication has been cut. They only communicate through the app, the app that they use for the Uber app, and there's no communication. It becomes difficult for workers to communicate with the management, or even if they face a problem when they are actually delivering, there's a huge problem because there's no communication. You just communicate through the app, and response don't come as quickly as you might expect them. But anyway, let me stop there because I don't want to take all the time. I maybe I'll ask some other questions later on when others have joined in. Thank you very much, Doc Gukrun.
Okay. No, thank you very much for your questions and comments. Yes, Shatam, I see your hand. Go ahead.
No, am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Dr. Chinguno, for such an insightful and well-prepared presentation. I just want to ask, based on the presentation of, I think at the start of the presentation, you had actually alluded to the fact that this gig work or this gig economy is assisting a lot in trying to curb unemployment and create jobs for those who might not necessarily have jobs. And also referring to what the previous speaker said in terms of other people or other drivers using their cars. Were you able to establish the relationship between the full-time workers of Mr. D and Uber Eats and the ones who maybe during the day they go to work and later on in the evening they actually engage in those? Because I think there's a growing trend of people who engage, yes, in this gig work, but you find that they're engaging in the gig work as part-time in trying to maybe supplement an income for themselves. So can you maybe slightly highlight that for us in terms of your findings and your report, to say what's the disparities or between those who are actually doing it as a means to a basic income and those who are doing it just to supplement the income that they're already having? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see, Dr. John, you also had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you to the presenter. Mine are two quick ones. The first, Dr. Chinguna, so in the if you look at the industrial relations system in the country, as a quick one from the top of the head, is it ready to deal with the complexities and challenges that come with these digital platforms, as sites of employment and sites also of income generation? That's the first one. Number two, in case I missed it, what is the basic understanding of space for these workers who are either on Mr. Delivery or Mr. Or Uber and others? What's the understanding of space? Maybe you could flesh something out based on nationality or what others would call as locals. Is their understanding the same? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think maybe we can take two more from the students in the seminar, and then Doc will give you the opportunity to respond. So I don't know, those who are in here who want to start your questions.
Can I?
Yes, go ahead.
Doc, on your article where you said that there is some sort of solidarity. Like the Zimbabweans, they group themselves, the Malawians, that way. But we call it solidarity. But my question is, don't you think that when they're thinking that it's solidarity, won't it like cause some sort of conflict in future? Because right now it's like there's what is this? They are grouping each other. Won't it like somehow cause a conflict? I don't know if you get me. I don't think it's really solidarity, because according to my own opinion, I feel like that thing can like raise some sort of conflicts, xenophobia, type of thing.
Okay, I think we'll squeeze in one more from those that are here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so in your presentations, I heard you talk about algorithms. So what I want to know is, in your maybe interviews, did you find out how do workers try to adapt to the algorithms and the rating system? Because you said based on their acting. So how do they adapt to such things like the algorithms and say you mentioned that it's gendered. You mentioned that it's very gendered, and most young people join the gig economy. So what I want to know is, what is the reason behind the gender? Is it because women feel like it's not safe, they don't want to work? Or is it because the companies themselves do not want to employ women? And the young people, is it because young people join the gig economy because of unemployment, or because they enjoy the liberty and freedom that the gig economy offers?
Okay, Joe, I think you can choose. It's quite a
Okay. Yes, I'll try to be very quick.
Yeah.
Then the first question on income with the remuneration. So when you look at it, like I've said, it's actually for Uber, whatever Uber, it pays according to distance. It's quite very, they call it dynamic pricing. So they pay maybe per kilometer, they pay 20 something for the first 3 kilometers, and then they increase it by another rand. It depends on the distance. It's quite very dynamic, it's not fixed. But while it's for Mr. D, you get paid according to 27, sort of like in a way per day, per trip. So you find that on average they make 10 to 15 trips per driver per day. So you find that because of tips and everything else, that will take that amount to this 8,000 to 20,000, sort of like in a way per month. So they actually 30% of the income is actually paid by the clients, not by the so the income is still quite very, very low. But the problem is like in the context where we are in South Africa, the minimum wage like last year is 3,000 rands. So we're talking about a context where the minimum wage is 3,000 rands, and then for these workers, they move to an industry where it becomes 8,000 to 20,000. For one of them, from 1,000 to 20,000 per month. But of course, it comes in with cost in terms of the cars, in terms of the petrol and all the like. So you'll find that there's a lot of questions around why is it that there's not a lot of South Africans, there's a lot of unemployment in Kalichiwe, but there are very few South Africans who are doing this type of work. it boils down to the same question around that the migrants, you have to use a motorbike for you to make profit. So you find that for South African and other sort of like others who come from, in women, it's also in particular, they can't, the problem is like, they find it very difficult to use motorcycle. So they want to, if you use a car, it becomes very expensive. So you find that that's why the migrants are dominant, especially the Malawians. They come from Malawi, they already know how to ride a motorcycle. It's very dangerous to ride a motorcycle in Kimberley or anywhere in South Africa. But if you, for example, you find like Zimbabweans, they don't have the same sort of like disposition in terms of using the culture of using motorcycle as part of public transport, unlike Mozambicans and Malawians. So the Malawians, they already, like this guy who was working in a spaza shop for a Pakistani, he said, no, I already knew how to drive the motorcycle before I came to South Africa. So when I heard that there's a job in Johannesburg, he was working in Abington. Then in Kimberley, then he had to say, then that this is a job for me. Because you already knew, but you find it. And then for the young South Africans, I think black, it's for South Africans and partly for Zimbabweans, the culture of motorcycle, more people who use motorcycle, they're usually white farmers, and it's not really a culture for black working class. So you find that they face a challenge in terms of maybe. So that's why you find that it's very difficult for South Africans to enter into this because they need to know how to use the motorcycle, which is, if you come in with the car, it becomes very uncompetitive and profitable. And then the use of the app in terms of between Uber and you will find that it is only the local, which is called, which was the local, which started off as a local, Mr. Take a Lot, Mr. Dio Take a Lot, whereby there is an office, they sign on, the driver sign on, there are managers there that they can talk to. But when it comes to Uber, Uber is very virtual. Everything that it does is controlled from San Francisco. There is no physical like interaction. So Uber tries to adopt a strategy where it tries to make itself invisible, which is the opposite of the local. The local, they still use the branding, they need the branding, they use the branding, there's whatever in terms of strike. But for Uber, it does not want to talk to anyone. It does not have an office. Uber does not have an office in South Africa. Here in South Africa, it has got a proxy, like an agent. For the Uber, the South African office here is an agent, which is there's only one in Johannesburg. The whole of South Africa, all the town, there's only one office. But it does not, the actual onboarding and offboarding is all done everything is done on the app. So it's part of the regime of control, part of the strategy of controlling labor by making themselves invisible. And then so that if they are visible to the workers will start demanding that they are in an employment relationship. So they define themselves, we are a technology company, we don't provide transport service or we don't deliver service. We just create a network. And then the relationship between full-time and part-time sort of like workers, you will find that the Uber model of doing things, this gig work, it's a model that was designed in the global north. So the intention was that these workers would be workers who are working somewhere. Then during their spare times, they will come in and work and do deliveries when they are off duty. They've got their own cars and whatever. But we find that when it comes to us here in the global south, 99% of the drivers, they are working full time on this particular sort of like way. So it creates a different sort of like relationship. The context is also quite very important. This technology was developed in the global north. Then the idea was that most of the workers would be working part time. But in the case of South Africa, the majority of the workers are actually, of course, there are a few sort of like part timers who are actually working somewhere else. But it's very. I try to upload myself on the app. My profile actually has not been approved.
Yeah. No, thanks a lot, Doc, for your responses. I think maybe we can take the last round of questions. I see Leslie online. You can go ahead, and then we'll give you the opportunity. Leslie. I don't know if it's a legacy hand, but there's another one that's online here from Osiasi. The question is, Doc, you mentioned that many people you interviewed were educated So do these organizations, that is Takealot and Uber Eats, do they plan to introduce some kind of strategy for career development opportunities for its employees, taking into account that they are educated or they are graduates and having to rely on 8K and tips essentially? Maybe this could be suggested, just a thought. Maybe we can look at what organizations can do to improve their employees' working conditions and gender inclusivity. So that's a question and comment on online. Tata, I think you had your hand up.
It's based on the question. We talk about them being collective.
Yes.
So I want to know if they are conscious or is the app the same way in apartheid they used to make people think they are collective and they are comfortable because they think they are facing the same experiences. So that makes them not be able to be resistant. So do you think them being collective makes them conscious to be able to resist against the things that are happening, or it actually makes them not be resistant because they are comfortable with their situation, as they think that all of them, they are experiencing the same thing and they think it's normal?
Yes, Kumo, you also had a hand up.
Yes. So you mentioned that on these platforms, the way that they get work is that they go onto the app and then they apply for a job. But does this not, in a way, also open up space for a lot of criminality, in the sense that yes, an individual can get work, but then it also opens room for this person who got the work to perhaps, I don't know, in a way, get other people come into the country, and then he has sort of like a loophole to get the others work in a non-ethical way. If you get what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yes, I think I have comments. With some of them, I think there will be questions. The issue of is a discriminatory practice that the drivers are using, like when it comes to service delivery or customer service. They prioritize the suburban areas and the township. And then I see there you have reduced this to race, that the driver's decision is based on race in the piece. I think you say that they choose whites than black people because whites are more benevolent than black people. Isn't it perhaps, or would we say that, or categorize this suburban people as the bourgeois and the township, then the working class, so that we don't reduce the conversation to race, because race is just a social construct, and we can have black people who are also in the suburbs and also behave like white people. So aren't we saying that this is an issue of the have and the have-nots? The drivers are making a decision on the have.
John, can you mute? Yes, go ahead.
That the drivers are making a decision based on the have and the have-nots. That this is more beneficial than this one. So that matter creates a matter of the bourgeois and the workers. And then again, still on this TP, it raises a very interesting. We are raising a very interesting point in terms of these apps or service providers, digital service providers, absconding their responsibility as employers and putting responsibility on customers as people to take responsibility of remuneration of
of drivers. I think that's a very, very interesting point that you raised, but also how is weaponized by the very same employer to say that if you don't behave to the customer, then you'll be penalized here and there. Last 2 points. One, is there a hope of the gig workers unionizing in the near future, taking into consideration the diverse characteristics of this particular workforce? And lastly, are we going to see algorithm being now the new boss of workers? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Obakem. I think we can take a few more. Lesedi, I think you had a hand up. I don't know if you are able to speak now online. Lesedi. Okay. Yes, please go ahead, tell you, and then we'll go to Dr. Isaac.
Okay, thank you, Doc, for your presentation. It was quite informative. I just wanted to ask on the point of the renting of the app, because on the paper I saw that there's somewhere where they do face recognition. So how do this thing of renting the app works? And also, because you are saying most of them, they are foreigners, and they need some kind of identification to register. So does that mean that since most of them they do have formal papers for registering, or there's some other way around to manage to come to the space? And the last question which I want to ask is about this worker solidarity. You are saying it's worker solidarity, but for me, I won't say it's a worker solidarity because it's not mostly based on working habits, but it's based on what can I say, nationality. So it's kind of a conflict between worker solidarity and national solidarity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Taniwe, for that, for your comments. Yeah, I think we can get some few more. Yes, and you go ahead.
So it was just to add on, right?
Yeah.
Doc raised an important point there where he said that some profiles are like the profiles that the drivers use, most of them are rented, right? Because we normally see that when you make an order, a certain number plate is going to appear only to receive like a message in the chat box with a different car registration to get that which you need to get, right? So I wanted to ask about, did you because I'm aware that you're conducting interviews, did you perhaps ask maybe about the percentage? Because isn't it that profile has an owner? So how do they pay that person, whether directly or indirectly? And also, what Bangtele was saying on how do they navigate the whole profile, because of some of them you have to do face recognition. Like there was that one that was introduced but disappeared. There was a certain app that was the way, in order to do anything, you have to I don't know if anybody knows, but it just came for a short period of time and it just disappeared. So how do they navigate all that profile? And also, you mentioned that women, right, they are the ones that use the small cars. I wanted to know, is that based on your findings when you were doing your interviews, or it's like your own thing? Also, I wanted to ask about the research design that you used. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Isaac, go ahead, and then we'll come to you.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. Thank you, Doc. Two issues. The first one is about worker rights. What you talked about when you said you referred to the precariousness of the work that they are doing. What I did not hear from your presentation is regards to the insurance that these workers are provided. I was wondering if you found out how that insurance works, because what we know broadly from other countries with Uber is that they seem to be providing insurance to these workers, but when it actually comes to claiming, they find hurdles in claiming. When, let's say, you are involved in an accident, or your car, and anything that happens to you, while at least you are delivering, or if it's a ride share, if you are with the rider, something like that. So that's the first one, how that plays out in South Africa. The second one, which is kind of a follow-up to your discussion about you talked about I wanted to contextualize the question, but what I wanted to find out is, do we see workers in South Africa as now how they are organized, in terms of, are they really organizing themselves to ask better conditions, or they find it very difficult to organize? Because it looks like the precariousness, again, it goes back to the idea of precarious, is kind of worldwide where Uber is operating. And that is related to another point which you raised about tips. Have you found how those tips have affected the way Uber pays? Because in what we know here is that what the workers are getting over years has been reducing. When Uber started, it was getting 15% and the worker getting 85%. Now it's the worker is getting about 52% and 48% or 45%, depending on the ride. 45% goes to the worker. So have you looked at that, how these tips have actually affected the amount of money that the workers are getting? Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac, for your follow-up questions. Theo, I think we can speak Theo and then Doc.
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to ask, when you said the tip essentially makes 30% of the workers. So in a sense, we as the clients become the employers since we pay for that. So wouldn't you say these companies are in a way exploiting them to a certain degree? Because I'm thinking a tip is supposed to be me thanking you for a service. It isn't supposed to be a necessity, that is, in a sense, that you need it as a way of generating income. So wouldn't you say the product that they put up, in the sense that the service, the company pays them way less than the service they essentially put out? I'm not sure if my question is making sense.
Yeah. Maybe let me just.
I'm not sure if this making sense, because I'm thinking that.
Okay.
If I tip you, a tip is me saying to you, Dr. Chris, thank you for arriving with my delivery on time, and then you go. It's not necessarily. It shouldn't be something you need to survive, is in a sense. So would it be that the person employing you is exploiting you, in a sense that you are underpaid, and the service you produce, they should be paid according to that service? I'm not sure if I'm reading it correctly.
Yeah, it's clear. Maybe I can just abuse my position as the chair to also throw in. Last week I wasn't able to ask, although I had so many questions, but it's because of these guys that are very brilliant and asking a lot of questions. So I think, Doc, there's a lot of emotional and aesthetic labor that's involved from me listening to you speak there. And I mean, it seems as if it's central for you to be rated, to get a positive rating. but also central for you to be tipped, that emotional and also aesthetic labor. And I think you also talked about the idea of renting the profile. So I was just curious to say, in what ways do these produce and reproduce the precariousness, or even exacerbate the precariousness of these people? So in as much as they are getting, let's say 8K or 15K or 20K, they have to look good as part of their aesthetic labor, maybe getting better equipment that they're using. It could be the bike, it could be the bucket that they're using to carry the stuff, it could be the uniform, or even not the uniform, but even their clothes. But at the same time, there's also a lot of investment in that emotional labor in terms of you getting to be tipped. And at the same time, some of these people are also renting a profile, which brings in some kind of layered forms of exploitation, because I own the profile, I'm renting it to the next person who has to look good and buy clothes, who is also to invest a lot in both emotional and aesthetic labor. So in what way does this reproduce the precariousness, or even exacerbate the precariousness of the gig workers? Maybe you can
okay.
You can just be selective.
Okay, yeah. The question around the tips, there are quite a lot of questions. I'll try to answer some of them. Yeah. So the way that it works is like the tip, it works, it's a double kick for the platforms. Because the worker expects to get a tip, so it regulates their conduct, how they perform. It becomes about they perform when they interact with the client, because they know that the client is not just a client, they also get paid from them. So what it does, it also now regulates how they conduct it. Also determines how they are going to be rated at the end of the day. So it's sort of like the tipping, which has become institutionalized in South African context. It has become sort of a way of a space for controlling, for regulating how the workers perform. So for the benefit of capital. And then at the same time, because it has become institutionalized, it has become incorporated on the app. You almost like every time they will send you like over and over the message again. How much are you tipping the customer? How much? So it becomes it has become also a part of our values and culture. It's not the same. How it started here in South Africa was that because these drivers were serving food from the restaurant, there's a culture of tipping that is already existing in South African sort of like culture. If when you go to a restaurant, someone cook food for you, you must tip them. That's part of our culture as South African. But when it comes to the app, because the app is from the global north, where I don't know, there are different cultures in terms of maybe how to deal with the restaurant. Because in some contexts, you are not supposed to tip. It's not part of the culture. So here the apps, they adapted that local culture and use it to maximize profit. So it becomes sort of like, because the driver actually ended up demanding, say, can we have this on the app? So that sometimes we've got problems. Our clients, they want to tip us, they don't have sort of like, in a way. So yes, of course, it may have negative impact in terms of income, because we find that for many cases, we've had many fuel increases, and then the companies are not very keen to increase the rate. The rate has been quite stagnant for quite a very long time. 27 rand per delivery. It has been for quite some time. But we've had sort of a series of increments in terms of fuel. And then how these workers are organized, and the question around solidarity, that's a very interesting sort of like questions that you guys are raising. And it has actually made me to think, when you look at solidarity, yes, in a way that it's, maybe you can say, like I would borrow from Doc, that is a layered forms of solidarity. Because you find that as workers in the platform, they do have got a collective sort of like, in a way, that subjective sort of like, in a way, in terms of how they understand themselves as workers. They've got an online, whatever, a WhatsApp group that is including everyone. And then the migrants, they have got several other smaller sort of like group. The argument, I try to ask them, why is it that you try to separate yourself as workers? They say, no, this one, what is laying a car in the other group. laying ekhaya, I don't know, you have to say this one. This one laying ekhaya. This one is for home. Well, the justification was that, you know what, my brother, why I have to do that? This is a very dangerous type of job. I can just get banned. Then with this one is ekhaya, people they contribute. They got like an informal or what was stock fair where they contribute. If you die, they've got insurance. They contribute and then they will transport your body to go to Malawi. For example, they fly the bodies from Cape Town or from here, Kimberley, to bury it in Malawi. They don't get buried here. They go home. All of them. If they die, they go and bury it home. So that is also sort of like anyway. So when you come to maybe. The argument here could be there's some layered sort of like in a way forms of solidarity in a way that in terms of resistance, it's quite very difficult to go for the workers to you find most of them how they exercise agents is mainly to adapt to so that they're able to adapt. It's very difficult for the way that the question around algorithms it makes it quite very difficult for them to organize. But of course, I would argue there is some form of solidarity. They managed to organize a strike, all of them. That is some element of solidarity, which may be sort of like layered on the basis of nationality. And then I talked about the tips. Then so when it comes to the question around renting of profiles in the facial recognition, yes, of course, there's a distinction here. The Uber is one that does facial sort of like recognition, but it's not. They don't do it when they do it. Maybe they say to me, maybe sometimes they are required to do those maybe once a week or twice a week. So when they want to do a facial recognition, they will always make sure that they will make sure they ride the bike and when the bike is to the owner of the profile. So when you are riding the bike, you can just always say I was not able to answer because I was on the move. But for the other app, you can rent the app because they only require to sign on. And then what happens after you sign on, it's really up to your other before take a lot. They just sign on, and then that's it. And then what is it? How do you the facial recognition? The question about women, how do they pay the profile? How do they pay this? What do you call the women? It comes from my research in a way that I almost literally know all of them. The one that has been here in Cuba, there were 200 of them, 250 Uber drivers, 200 on Tagalog, and another 20 on. I literally know all of them. There are about 3 to 5 women, and all those 5 women, they all use small cars. And for women, it's also a bit the question around security is quite a problem because of our violence against women in our society. You find that a lot of women they tend to face a lot of. They are a bit more vulnerable in terms of how they go to the township. Because, for example, one of the women drivers indicated that when they get an order to go to ACAS, they have to send in where they're going to their other male colleagues so that they can always check on them because of security, the issue around security, which is quite a very problematic area. Then, in terms of the space, how the workers are selected between suburban space and service in ACAS. Yeah, of course, this is the workers themselves who reduces it to rest. But of course, the reality of the matter is there's a material sort of like in a way that is tied to the fact that there's a material condition that is tied around the fact that because of the history of the apartheid geography, the workers they expect workers who if they come to Monument House, the suburban areas, the expectation is that the people who live there they are more sort of like in a way affluent, they are bound to get more. Unlike when they go to the location, which in this case, coincidentally, it happens to be a very black sort of like, but underlying it's about the material conditions in terms of how the workers they try to maximize their income through that sort of like in a way, those sort of like in a way, that's particular knowledge about the history, tied to the history, the geography of South Africa. Then the question on career development. The starting point is that as far as Uber take a look at, these are not their employees. So we cannot talk about career development. We cannot talk about even if they've got PhDs or diplomas, whatever. It doesn't matter for Uber and whatever. It does not matter at all. So in terms of the industrial relations policy, there's a question on how what is happening in terms of this. Of course, there's a discussion in a way that how our industrial relations regime policies in terms of Department of Labor, it has not been able to cope and catch up with the changes in the industrial relations, especially with the coming of digital. So we're still quite very behind in terms of policies. What sort of policies can sort of like, the first thing is about there's a contested debate whether we define these people as workers or as entrepreneurs. There's a court from Cape Town Court, one of the South African courts has ruled that these people, they are entrepreneurs. And then the minister of what? The minister of one of the government ministers has also interpreted in line with the cause that these are entrepreneurs, they are not sort of like, they are not workers. So you find that there's sort of like, there's still there's a gap between how this digital technology is sort of become pervasive, but at the same time, we don't have policies that are sort of like, that are inclined in terms of maybe how we can solve that. Then in terms of maybe how they adapt to algorithms, very interesting. You would find that because you are given your work according to where you are located. So I also came to understand it now quite very lately. There's a way that they can also affect their geographical location. I know you guys must know that. What is it called? Where your location, you can tweak it around and say you are here when you are there. What is it called? You can fake your location on the app, on the phone. So you can get orders once you are here, but when you are from that other side. So those are some of the ways in terms of maybe how the workers are also able to manipulate the algorithm for their own benefit. And then there are many other strategies that they use.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. I think I'll just give you three last. These are the last question. There is a question by Jacqueline. So she's asking. Since everything about gig work is almost virtual, for example, Uber, as you mentioned, that it's headquartered and stationed in San Francisco. How do gig workers manage the unpredictability and insecurity of gig work? And are they able to fight for their rights in any way? That's Jacqueline's question. And then I think I see, Lesedi, your hand is up. Are you able to speak? You can go ahead.
Yes, thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Good day, everyone. I wanted to ask, in particular, to emotional labor. I think I was a bit distracted with my network. I didn't hear if it was touched on. How do the gig workers deploy labor? Can you explain that briefly and fully in a way?
Okay, thank you, Lesedi, for that question. So, Doc, I think those are the two last questions that we.
Okay. Yeah, on how they are able to manage and fight for their rights, it's quite very limiting. You would say the control, but nevertheless, it does not mean that there's no room for resistance. You would find that, like in the case of, it also depends on the app. If you are talking of Take a Lot, there's quite a lot of room to maneuver in terms of maybe how the workers, they use the WhatsApp group with management, they use it as a space, some form of informal bargaining. For example, there's a price increase of petrol. This guy posts a story about how his children and wife, they are starving at home, but he's working every day. And so it's almost like that appeal to the management to sort of like, in a way, to feel for them. And then when they are facing challenges with clients, they also use that as a space to talk back to management. There's no room for collective bargaining, but that is the way the managers, they hear them. They, of course, they don't respond, but they actually are listening. They're also hearing them. And there's also an element of around where the workers, there's a lot of use of what do you call it, social media, where they resort to social media as a way of trying to organize. There has been some quite very successful strikes, I would say, maybe to say, in one of the days, I think the Home Affairs was very hard on them because arresting them because they don't have papers. So they decided to withdraw their services. And then there was a crisis on the app because there were very few drivers who have got papers could do the work. And then there was a question around papers. Yeah, of course, these guys they do have got papers in a way, because there's no way that they can work in South Africa. But you know, it's very difficult to just the authenticity of those papers if they are really authentic. And the apps, they are not really interested in verifying whether the papers, as long as the worker has submitted something that says they've got a passport, they've got a work permit, or they've got an asylum seeker, whatever permit. The apps, they don't have the energy to go and check, like Home Affairs, to check if it's really something that is authentic. As long as they can put on the system that way, this person has got a work, whatever, this is a work visa. But in some cases, you find that some of those work permits, they are not authentic. Then, of course, the deployment of emotional labor, it's quite, because the way that you deliver your service determines how you are going to be paid and how much you are going to be rated. That's the first point. And then, because if you get a rating of less than 4.3, you run the risk of getting deactivated. And then it does not determine your rating also, it also determines 30% of your income, because the client is not just a client, but it's also actually someone who is remunerating you. So it's part of the strategy of these apps. They try to confuse the employment relationship, turning around things so that the worker is also sort of like a way of controlling how workers perceive themselves. So what is important in a way, this type of workers, they've got a very different subjectivity, if you put it that way, how they understand who they are, which is very different from the traditional sort of like workers. So the problem that we have, the traditional trade unions, they try to use the traditional ways of organizing workers, but these workers, they've got a different perception of how they understand who they are, and how they relate to their employer, and how they relate to their clients. When they see a client, they are seeing a boss. When they are seeing the platform, they are also seeing a boss, but in a different way. So the trade union, they only want to come and emphasize that the employer is the app, is the Uber, and whatever. So there's no way that the trade unions have been able to. So the question, the last point, the question whether it is going to be possible to organize, I'm quite very optimistic in a way that I think it will be possible to, but that's a long term. There's already some sign that collective solidarity, but which has not been very successful. But over time, I think it will be very possible for these workers to be organized, but not in traditional trade union sort of like saying new forms. We need new forms of organization, new forms of. There's already sign that these workers, they are organized not only just on the employer identity, but on those identities that will come from Malawi. When I die, my body needs to be repatriated to go home. That can become the center in terms of how to organize this new. So we need to have new forms of there are new forms of collective organization that are emerging, but not in the traditional sort of like way sense in terms of trade unions, the way that we know them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doc, for sharing your work with us. And everyone online, thank you very much for joining us. And I need to send my apologies. We normally do this within an hour, between 2 and 3. But because of technology, we had serious challenges to share and sometimes also to connect. That's why we were way over time. But thank you very much for staying with us up to the end. And we do hope that you join us again next week on Tuesday, 2 to 3. We also have another very interesting presentation. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you again next week. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we can take a break. Okay. If you want to eat, you can also enter back.
Thank you, Doc, for this.
Some food. Yeah, it's class to be. Yeah.
They'll continue, but we eat this food. Oh, they have to eat. Yeah. Oh, you can do
Thank you very much. Those online who are close by, there's some food here. And you can also come down to meeting room 154 and grab some food.